for the COVID-19 pandemic, the unemployment rate of women was a lot higher than men due to the fact that they simply weren't getting paid as much as men. Once the COVID pandemic hit, a lot of the spike with women and their unemployment rate increased dramatically. In a Woman in the Workplace article, this term or this phenomenon was coined as secession. And this basically refers to the fact that 5.4 million women exited the workforce due to the fact that they weren't getting paid enough and the fact that they had to care for their children at home and balance the two. And basically, a lot of them dropped out of their jobs to homeschool their children and just really provide for their family and focus that at home. So a lot of them had to work on Zoom, as you know, and this was also a big struggle for them. And the term secession also refers to the fatigue that a lot of women felt during this time because they had to balance both. And this was really detrimental on women and especially companies because a lot of companies no longer had as much women to work in their jobs. So this really affected a lot of healthcare workers and a lot of healthcare companies as well. So there are many things we can do to help this gender pay gap, and that is by taking a pledge, by making sure you're receiving the compensation that you need, and participating in Equal Pay Day and becoming informed. So Equal Pay Day is basically a national day to gain momentum on the pay gap across the nation. So a lot of things that we can do, especially as California residents, is use hashtags on social media. So the hashtag this year was Equal Pay Day 2021, but more specifically for California residents, it was Equal Pay CA. And so this basically gains your momentum as a California resident, so that way it pushes other states to enforce that the pay gap is lessened between men and women. So when you use these hashtags, it basically allows for protests and walks to happen. And so if you do decide to use this hashtag, make sure that you are looking to see if there are any walks or protests that you could possibly take part in. And you can post these on social media as well to gain that momentum and push that initiative out as well. And these protests and social media hashtags can be found on the California Women's website. And there are a lot of resources on there basically to help you and to help you find where to go and what hashtags to use for that year. So it is obviously still an issue across the nation, and even though California is taking their part in trying to lessen the pay gap, a lot of states still are not, and there's still a big problem in California as well. In a different 2019 Nexus Uni article, there is the Equity Pay Pledge, and basically the Equity Pay Pledge ensures that companies take that initiative to look at the numbers and look at their spreadsheets and make sure that the pay gap is basically equal. So if you get a company to sign the pledge, then they are supposed to and have to do the numbers and do the research in order to lessen that. And we can basically promote this to companies. So if you want to, in your workplace, you can ask them to sign this pledge. And if you ask them to sign this pledge, then it is their choice. And if they don't decide to sign the pledge, then we can still use the hashtag EqualPayCA to get that initiative out there. So the law in California currently states that there should not be a pay gap based on sex discrimination, but this leaves a lot of room for loopholes in that law. So basically they can find another way to still justify quantify this pay gap, just not on your sex. So an example of this is the Eileen Rizzo case. Basically, specifically in California, in Fresno County, California, the way that they calculate your pay is by this 10-step process. And basically, this 10-step process is where the employer gets to ask you what your pay was in your previous job. And when they ask you what your pay is on your previous job, they only add 5% to that pay. And basically, this is the 10-step process where they have you in tiers. So Eileen Rizzo started off on her first tier. And 4 years later, when she's talking to a colleague who was a male, she realized that he started on the 9th tier. So he was getting paid a lot more than her, and she had a lot more qualifications than he did. So, and an article on EBSCOhost, 2015 article on EBSCOhost, basically it states that these companies are trying to justify different ways to still have this pay gap. And so basically by taking the pledge, it pressures these companies to really look at where the discrepancies are in their numbers. Another thing you can do is to let your workplace know. So a big part of this is when you are first getting hired and you're having an interview, when the interviewer asks you if you have any questions, it is good to ask questions like, is there anything being done about the pay gap between men and women, and to just have that open and honest conversation with them. California is also currently trying to pass another law that basically is like the pledge, but it enforces those numbers to be looked at, but just actually put down in the law. So by doing this, you can motivate employers to really think about that pay gap, and maybe that they hadn't thought about it before. So on the Pay Gap California website, we can obviously see that the numbers are still very high in a lot of states. Although it has lessened, it is pretty bad still. And so the things we can do, again, are to really just make sure that you are trying to promote this pledge out for companies to take the pledge. In California, we have 27 companies that have taken this pledge, but it'd be great to get more on the pledge. To join protests and movements and really use the hashtag to promote the pay gap and to just really get informed. So with that, I'll end with a quote. The trend of women exiting the workforce may hold back national GDP growth and also has negative effects on individual financial and health outcomes, which is all to say that we would have a lot more women in our workforce if this pay gap was fixed.